We're really looking forward to revisiting them with our community and hoping that they feel the same way. The theme in one book is going to lead, to something in a later grade that's all just going to pull together for this cohesive education, and that will give them always examples in their lives from their reading for everything that they could possibly have to deal with.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Shane Saxon.
Welcome to another episode of Classical Etc., but a very special episode, because it's the very first crossover episode.
Sure.
That's a term that people use, I've heard, with a new podcast Memoria Press is doing, a new show called Novel Thoughts with Ian Galloway, Lilo, and Tanya Charlton. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about kind of the central conceit of that show, and I just want to hear about why everyone should be listening to it and why you have enjoyed making it so far. So I actually want to start there. Lee, what is Novel Thoughts about? What was the idea for doing the show? And tell people why they should listen to it.
Well, we initiated the podcast, or the show, excuse me.
I keep calling it a TV show. Yes. And Dave keeps saying, right. You're not doing a TV show. I said, but it is a video and people will watch it on TV, right?
A lot of people have YouTube on their TV.
This is Tanya's sideways entry into stardom on
That's
a
right.
TV show, and it's my
Yeah.
sideways entry into stardom in the baking world. So
That's right.
You have food on your show?
We do have food, Shane. We get food
I've
when we
been
go.
baking for every episode. Homemade scones,
Bryce, you are
biscuits.
fired.
They
There's
are
never been food on our show.
They are so good, too.
Yeah.
That's the only reason Ian and I are there is just for the food.
We forgot that you didn't know about that. So.
Or that he's never provided food to
That's
us.
right.
It just feels more hospitable to serve baked goods and coffee
Absolutely.
to talk about books.
It sounds delicious.
No, the idea about the show is that we basically wanted to invite a broader audience into the basically water cooler conversations we're having here about books. We talk about books all the time. There are so many interesting comments that people in our office make about the books in our curriculum particularly, and we just wanted to open that conversation up to a broader audience. And so we're just talking about the books in our curriculum basically, and just giving people fodder for conversations that they can have in their classrooms or in their homeschools about the books in our curriculum. We have said specifically we're not particularly experts when it comes to literary criticism or anything about the books, except the fact that we've been living in this stream of Memoria Press books for a long, long time. And so we want to offer the connections and some of the elements that make the literary experience in the Memoria Press curriculum cohesive for our teachers and students.
Tanya, what about you? What is the show about, and what have you enjoyed about making it so far?
You always ask me the same question that somebody else has answered thoroughly.
That's because I trust in your creative ability.
One day I'm going to say ditto. Well, I totally agree that it's just conversations that are ongoing here anyway. But I'm hoping, and as a former teacher, that if once we get, we're going to go through all the books, but it's going to take a little while to get there. But if I had this, when I was teaching 5th grade, had somebody talk to me for half an hour about Robin Hood, all the themes in Robin Hood, and what I should be gleaning from that and then passing on to my students, it would have been a huge tool. And I hope that's what this becomes, is a tool for teachers and homeschool teachers also, that will help them to have a better literary experience with each book, because these books are really special to us, and we want them to be special, to students, and that they are, Cheryl always said that she wanted to build a student's library. That's what she was doing, a library of books that they would never want to let go of. And so I'm hoping that this will help to do that, just to instill a love for these books that we've chosen, that, as Lee said, we're not experts, but you can only choose so many books. So maybe there would have been some better choices along the way. I don't know, but we're happy with what we've chosen. And it's not that we are static. We have revisited them and we're continue to be happy with them. So
Yeah. Ian,
I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. And Ian, can you tell me a little bit about the format aside from baked goods?
No, that's right.
Are you doing a book for show? Like, what's it going to be like?
Yeah, essentially that's going to be the goal. These first few are a little bit more unique because we do start with kindergarten and we want to go all the way through our grades, beginning with kindergarten. So we do talk about the read alouds in kindergarten, first and second grade, which have been kind of murky for people. You know, we're trying to bring some insight into why we work through the read alouds and what they're preparing students for. So generally speaking, you're going to join us as we eat some goodies, drink some coffee. We're going to have some rapid fire questions inspired by you, talking about things that we like about each book. And then allowing
inspired by me, Shane Saxon.
Yeah. Well, in the way that you do your rapid fire, what are you reading now? Which we didn't do this, I guess this time, but anyway.
Well, I got it into the last podcast because I insisted, but if you want to talk about what you're reading, I'm sure Shane would.
Yeah, I guess we could end with that, Shane. Was that your plan?
Whatever you want.
Sure. Okay. But anyway, we're going to talk about we're going to introduce ourselves, talk about what we're doing, and then have a conversation about these books. And some of that you may be able to find, supplementary information about the book that you may not get from just our guides and stuff like that. These conversations are going to be, organic, off the cuff. We're trying to talk about the things that we love about them and make connections across our literature, so that when you're reading Charlotte's Web in third grade, you have ideas that we're not wanting to overwhelm the student with ideas, but give them some seeds that may sprout later and make those connections at a later point. So.
And I'd like to add that when I say that, we're having a conversation, we're having it among the people in my library, but also we want to be having it with our audience. We want to be having it with our teachers, with our homeschooling parents. And so we hope that, those listening to this conversation will pipe in and say, hey, you missed this, or this is a great ancillary book to this. And so we appreciate those kinds of comments from our audience too, because we do not have a monopoly on insight. And we want as much conversation with our Memoria Press community as possible.
Sure. One practical question: do listeners need to have read these books before they listen to episodes, or what would you suggest in that regard?
I don't think so. I mean, I think these could serve as great introductions to the themes of the novel. So it really just depends on the nature of the reader. I often like to have an introduction to something before I begin reading it, but it wouldn't also, by no means necessary.
Hopefully we'll encourage some enthusiasm for these books. Right. And if you haven't read the books, hopefully we can persuade you to pick, a particular book up. Yeah. But if you have read them, then, maybe you corroborate our ideas about books or add to those.
Yeah. Lee, it seems like an important part of the conversation that you three are going to be having is why the books in our curriculum are good books and why students should read them. There are so many books out there. How did you choose? And I know that Mrs. Lowe was choosing a lot of these in conversation with you. How did you decide what were good books and what were not good books? And why is it important to choose good books for our students in these ages?
Well, I mentioned previously that I lived longest in third grade. And so I was witness to Mrs. Lowe as she developed the curriculum from grammar school up. And Tanya lived in fifth grade. And
by that, you don't mean that you were held back in third and fifth grade for multiple years?
We stay. I never graduated from third grade. No, I taught the first third grade class. It helped with that curriculum most. Tanya did so with fifth grade when Mrs. Lowe pulled us from our financial fields to
like real jobs. We had real jobs.
Right. Sure. And so really, the genesis of the Read Aloud program was basically born of panic. I had 5 children in 7 years, and my son was 7 the week that my 5th child was born, and I just wanted to make sure that all of my children had a literary rich experience. And I was afraid that the day-to-day grind of taking care of 5 young children would prevent me from prioritizing something that I valued. So I basically set out a plan for myself to make sure that, Baxter wouldn't miss The Grinch, and he wouldn't miss The 12 Days of Christmas. And, he wouldn't miss these classics that I knew he needed. And I also knew what third grade looked like at Highlands Latin School, and I wanted to make sure that he was prepared. So basically it was just, I set out on this goal as a mother, just trying to do what I felt was good for my own children. And Tanya, my dear friend, my lifelong friend, recognized how much help I needed. So she pitched in, and we bought books, so many books. And we filled my china cabinet in my dining room with children's books. And we read every single one, and we read them to my children, and we read them during nap time. And and it took us a few years actually to do that. We got a lot of opinions from people. We read a lot of lists. We really kind of studied. And honestly, the books that we selected just bubbled up as books that we wanted to read our own children, and books that we felt would get the primary student to a third grade readiness for the grammar school books.
So it basically, we talk all the time about how high school was a top-down approach. High school was formulated first, and then then Cheryl figured out what we needed to do to get there. And so the same thing, Lee did the same thing she had taught third grade. And so to come up with the read alouds, it was basically the same thing, a top-down approach. What did we need to do to have our students, to give them an enriching experience that would introduce the things we're going to be talking about in grammar school?
Sounds like a fascinating time. You two were reading hundreds and hundreds of books.
It was,
Can you take me back there? What were some of the conversations you were having? What were the things that you were like, this book doesn't quite meet our goals? What were the elements you were looking at?
Well, some of them were just awful. And so those were easy to push aside. But there are a lot of good books.
Right. We didn't necessarily, there are so many good books. That's what we always want to say. There are so many good books. And just like we don't have a monopoly on insight, we don't have a monopoly on, discernment. Others can curate great book lists too. But these are the books that we wanted. We wanted to make sure that we had books that had beautiful pictures, that sort of followed the classical pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness, that had those themes available. We wanted to make sure that we introduced the idea of traditions, and accepting things that have been gifted to us from previous generations. So, for instance, Groundhog's Day, things that you would think, why do we have a book like that? But it's simply about traditions. The same as a tree is nice. In the back of the book, it talks about we appreciate a tree because someone before us planted it. So these are the kinds of ideas that we wanted to just have available in the very simplest ways. And we don't want to burden young students with those ideas, but we wanted those ideas available to us. We wanted poetic language. We wanted adults to be speaking kindly to children. We wanted demonstrations of friendship. We wanted some demonstrations of sacrificial love. All these ideas that we're going to get into deeply in the curriculum. We wanted them to introduced in very age-appropriate, sweet ways in the primary years. And
also, we wanted it to be, we've got prose, we've got poetry. We wanted it to be a little elevated language, and illustrations were important to us too. That they be tasteful, and that we give a variety of illustrations, and also classic authors that you don't want to miss. So you've got somebody like Dr. Seuss or Margaret Wise Brown, and how do you choose among them? So that was part of it too, was which one of these do we do, or which two or three? And do we want somebody, I think Margaret Wise Brown's probably in every year, K to 2. Yeah. Now, I do want to say though that we didn't choose third grade and up. Cheryl Lowe chose all of those books, and they remain what they were. There have been a few changes in high school, but really the 3rd through 6th grade is exactly what it was when she chose it. And so we just have come alongside her choices with those. And so once for our episodes, we're doing one on each year of read alouds, because there are 34 in a year. Yeah. But then after that, I think each episode will be us talking about one novel, like an entire episode on Charlotte's Web. So I think especially for young parents, that this could be really helpful. And even as we move up, if we're moving up faster than you need to, we're always advocates of reading at least the novels that your children are going to get to before they get there. So hopefully that will encourage
Absolutely.
that reading also.
So Lee and Tanya have been, steeped in these books for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you weren't well versed in the kindergarten read alouds before.
I was not.
This.
Yeah.
But you have a daughter who's 6?
No, she is 4 and a half.
4, okay.
She'll be 5 very soon.
So you're thinking a lot about
actually, yes,
about this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's your impressions reading through these books, getting more familiar with them now?
Yeah, when we started doing the show, one of my assigned tasks before our first episode was to read through the kindergarten read alouds myself, and try to take some home to Hannah and read as well. And my wife assisted with that. She was really the one that helped read some of these things to Hannah and just try to figure out which ones were our favorites, her favorites. Hannah was very coy when I asked her what her favorite one was. She said, "Well, I don't know if I can make that decision today." Okay. So we're giving her time. We'll see what she likes. But I found some of them so charming, so funny. And of course, I have ones that I didn't care for, ones that I liked a lot. I mean, I enjoyed reading Hubert's hair-raising adventure.
What do you mean there were some you didn't care for?
There were some that I just didn't like, but that's fine.
What are you telling to Lee and me?
That's
I
fine.
think that's part of it. That's part
right.
of it.
But and they shall remain nameless. They are what they are. But books like Hubert's Hair-Raising Adventure, it's just so funny, but the language was great. It all rhymed. The themes that are there make you think as an adult. You've got a book like Hubert, and he's this prideful, arrogant lion. And by the end, you're not quite sure how he's changed, if he's changed, because he loses his hair and he goes into this kind of depression, but then his friends come around him and they help him regrow his hair, and his hair goes wild and crazy. And then at the end, he seems still kind of prideful, but that led to a discussion in one of our episodes about pride versus vanity. And so there are things there that you as an adult can still learn from these. And they're not necessarily conversations that you're having with your 5-year-old at the time, but maybe later down the road, you can say, "Do you remember that story? Do you remember what was going on there?"
Planting seeds.
That's
Seeds.
Right. That's right.
And then again, some of my wife is an artist. I can't draw at all, but just looking at some of these books, looking at the illustrations in Hubert's or in Owl Moon, that's just so beautiful. I mean, seeing some of these things, books really kind of come to life again. And, you get so used to reading novels, and that becomes a new passion or a new love. And I love reading novels, but then going back to these kids' books and being reminded of not only the stories and the words on the page, but the stories and the illustrations themselves. I mean, that's just a cool experience.
Can you tell Shane that this is self-indulgent?
Yeah,
We just love to talk about books, and so we're inflicting that
straight.
on you.
Yeah, that's right.
You guys are
And
spending
the general
several hours a
public.
week eating goodies and reading good books. And we call this work?
Yeah, that's right.
I know. Isn't it beautiful?
We worked really hard to give language to justify this.
That's right.
I want all the listeners to know that the Classical Etc. production, this is rigorous. This is hard work.
It is definitely
It's not
harder.
this playful novel thoughts.
That's right. That's right.
I want to circle back, Lee, because you mentioned just several things that you see as admirable qualities in books, but I want to camp on that for a second, because I think a lot of classical educators are thinking about what makes, Anna Karenina great or Hamlet great. Can we maybe elaborate on what makes Hubert's Hair-Raising Adventure or Owl Moon great? What are the things that parents should be aware of as they are choosing books for their 5-year-old or their 6-year-old?
Well, again, I think it's, you don't want to belabor ideas that are too mature for the child. What we really want is a student to love reading, and we want the parent to help the student discern what is good and beautiful by just giving an abundance of good and beautiful things, so that the student will then be able to make those choices independently. And so you don't want to sit down with a book and say, okay, we have to talk about self-indulgence because we're going to be talking about this all the way through the curriculum. But as a parent, I do very often, use characters in the books and use stories in the books for situations that are happening routinely in my home. I mean, bread and jam for Francis, the child who gets stuck eating, a particular food. I mean, we can use that as an opportunity to say, good things come from having a spirit of adventure. And you may, parents say those kinds of things, but when a student can feel like a friend of theirs, Francis, has gone through the same thing, they may be willing to maybe stretch a little bit. The idea of, discomfort or inconvenience or being scared. I mean, these are routine things that are happening for children as they're growing, and all of these books address these ideas in very comfortable ways. And I think that they can really become friends of the child who's experiencing that, and the parent, knowing these situations with these characters in these books, can use them in positive ways to say, well, look, your friend Francis tried something other than jam.
Eating your broccoli is a sense of adventure.
But there are countless opportunities, in these books to sort of just give another opportunity to connect with your child.
Honey, what about you? What are some of the things in the primary read aloud? I hate to ask you a question I've already asked Lee, but what are some of
I'm used to it.
the things that you are looking for in these read alouds that make them excellent versus just good or okay?
As we chose them, at the time, we were really working on what would be the best experience for a young child. And that was really it. We were building science and history around it, art and music and poetry. And so it was all, when we chose it, it needed to be able to be the foundation for all of that. And so it was really serious. But now when going back and rereading them, I'm really pretty amazed at how they just have this overarching feel of appropriateness for a 5-year-old that they speak to a 5-year-old, that they really are on that level, and that we didn't get lost. Sometimes you think we get lost in a project, and we don't realize the overview of what we've done. And that was the thing that struck me just looking at them as a group now, is how perfect they are really for a child who is embarking on school and embarking on adventures as an older student. And I'm hoping it'll be true for first grade and second grade too.
Was there any process for determining the age appropriateness of the read alouds as you were determining them?
Well, like the vocabulary for sure, the number of words on a page. For K to 2, we were only going to pick classic books. So there was never a question of content really being a problem. We would never have chosen anything that would be a content problem that anybody would have to worry about.
Also, my own children. I mean,
we
cannot discount the fact that
right.
my own children, the books that they would bring to us again and again on the couch. I mean, and that's what you really want in a book. And if you're trying to grow children who love to read, what books do they love to read?
Sure.
So I think that,
yes,
you can't
and
discount that.
And if I did, if Lee liked a book and I was just a little iffy about it, and she said, Baxter loves this book, then I would know that was a good choice. And so
he wasn't the primary.
Sure.
Everything Baxter likes.
But it was an influence.
It wasn't in,
Sure.
we did want the input of young children. That's why I asked Ian to find out which was Hannah's favorite.
And so far,
but she won't tell us.
That's right.
Yeah. Well,
She's very private with her
It's because
opinions.
they're all so good.
That's right.
A lot of this conversation has revolved around the earlier grades because that's what you.
That's where we are,
on.
right?
What are you looking forward to as you move towards the grammar school and high school?
Oh, we're just, we've, as I've said in Classical, et cetera, over and over, we are revisiting all of these books just to be sure, that we still feel really good about the choices. And we are overwhelmingly happy with what we've done so far. And so we're really looking forward to revisiting them with our community and hoping that they feel the same way. And just talking about the themes that are in them and the connections and how the theme in one book is going to lead, to something in a later grade that's all just going to pull together for this cohesive education of children, and that will give them always examples in their lives from their reading for everything that they could possibly have to deal with on a third grade level or a fifth grade level.
Sure.
And the other thing that is important to me is just, helping our students interact with books in meaningful ways. I mean, I think helping students develop a contemplative attitude towards books is important, which is one of the reasons, even in the primary grades, we read books multiple times. We suggest that because you can glean something new every single time, even in very, in books for the youngest students. And so bookmarking, paying attention, to beautiful passages or vocabulary that you don't know or allusions that, make a book exciting and connective. And so just, helping students develop the patience, I think, to progress through a curriculum with increasingly difficult and meaningful books. And so I think that is one of the hangups with the literary experience for many people. It's just, the idea is I pick up a book, I start on page 1, I finish the end, check, it's finished. Mm-hmm. But the interaction is not, doesn't value contemplation. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really a kind of a skill or a habit that I would like to encourage in our students because it's a different attitude in the way you interact with books.
You'll certainly get more of that as you go forward.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's, to me, when I read Anna Karenina or, these Dante or these, books in the top of our curriculum, those aren't books that can be read quickly. You cannot just say, check, finished the Divine Comedy. So, you have to be willing to spend, a lot of time with a single sentence or a single paragraph. And you have to have developed that attitude of, I'm going to read this book and then I'm going to look in the sky and say, what in the world was that about? And, just have the patience to interact with a book that way. And
with the pencil in your hand.
That's right, with the pencil in your hand. And I think that's the thing that really breeds, a quality literary experience for our students.
Ian, anything you're looking forward to as you move into the older grades?
Well, those are the books that I've been more familiar with, so I think that I have more to say and more to offer, just an insight about those books. But yeah, I think instilling in that everything we've discussed so far, I just want to affirm and say that's right. That's what we want to do. We want to start treating books not like the one-off kind of thing, but it's fine to even go back and just read a section of a book later that you'd like. Like you think about books differently, and I think that's what we're going to be excited about going into and talking about. But also, one of the things that I think I'm really excited about is because I have a young daughter who's starting to read some of these she's not starting to read. She can't read yet. She's starting, learning. Next year she'll really learn. But as she begins to read these books, I do want to have the awareness of where at least a good choice of books, a good pathway out there already chosen for me is, and how I can connect those higher level books back to her. And think about those things in a deeper way. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits is that we can till that soil and really prepare the soil in our students, plant those seeds, and us going through all the books that we have really brings to light the beauty of a cohesive curriculum.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we're talking about in all this elevated adult language about it, but ultimately it's just for you to have an experience, at least in the young grades, but all the way through if you can. I know it gets harder, but with those read aloud books, just sheer delight, wonder, imagination, that the student will have that joyous experience by just holding a book and reading it with an adult.
Last question. What is one book that you've gone back to for the making of novel thoughts that you'd recommend to everyone?
Well, we just only did kindergarten.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer yet for that.
Well, there's like 40 books.
Well, I can speak to, Ian may not be able to speak to this, but Lee and I have been heavily going through third, fourth, getting ready to start fifth. And the book that I think, so for me, it was my question about Lassie is it too sad? So, okay, we're going to put that one to bed. But the Moffats, because we knew Charlotte's Web was amazing, Farmer Boy was amazing, but we were like, are we really going to think the Moffats is the right choice? And we were just so surprised and excited to find what a charming little book this was and how full of good content that is age appropriate for students is. So that would be my surprise that I've gone back to.
I agree. The Moffats is so meaningful, and it surprised us. So see, now I get to say ditto, right?
That's right.
I also,
well, we've done this together,
right,
so
and
it's really hard. We
right.
have the same thoughts.
That's right.
But I don't bake scones.
I thought The Extraordinary Egg was hilarious.
I love The Extraordinary Egg. I love The Extraordinary. It's just a book full of good humor.
It's so charming. I love
is.
that one. It surprised me because it was my children are grown and I'm not living in those books quite as much, but I'm going to give it to my nieces.
Right.
Yes.
Can I change your question and make it more appropriate for myself?
I want you to do whatever you want to do.
That's right.
He is a host, and he's a rival host now.
I'm going to answer what was my favorite read aloud. Is that
that's
fine?
a good one.
Because I think that's kind of the only thing.
Okay.
My favorite read aloud, I did love Hubert's Hair Raising Adventure, thought it was hilarious. But my introduction, I had never read it before, but How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World just made me smile on the second page, because you start, and I mentioned this in Novel Thoughts, the girl wants to go make an apple pie, so she goes to the market. The market's closed, so the next possible thing she does is goes to Europe and starts on a journey getting all the supplies that she needs. And it's just such a great, I think, instance of how these books are working on multiple levels. It's telling a delightful story with fun illustrations that a kid may not even think much about, other than, oh, okay, well, this comes from here, this comes from there. But you as an adult know, actually, this is teaching geography and economics. Like, it's telling you where food comes from.
Yes.
And so there are higher levels of value to a book like that. But even those thoughts were secondary to just the delight of turning the page and being in Europe.
Beautiful artwork in that book too. But we need to feel sorry for Ian, because his job is to corral Lee and me into some kind of conversation that makes sense, Ian, stays on topic.
I'm praying for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. I'll need some help.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I look forward to listening. Thank you guys for having this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Classical Etc. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider liking this video. If you want to join the conversation, then you can comment below, and if you want to stay connected, please subscribe to our channel. I hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll see you next time.